I've owned my Yeti for over 3 years now. I've lived in a van with it, I've used it by myself and with children, and overall it's been a great cooler. But it's not perfect, and there are some problems with Yeti coolers, and that's what I want to talk about in today's episode. Hey, I'm Ryan from thecoolerbox.com, and I review a lot of different coolers. And before you go out and spend a lot of money on a Yeti, it's important to know the issues with it to discover whether or not this cooler is going to be suitable for you. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of the problems with the Yeti cooler. The first problem is the most obvious one, and that is the price. These coolers are expensive, and there's no two doubts about that. They start at around $200 for the smallest one, the Roadie, which is about 20 quarts, and then it goes upwards from there. This is a Yeti 45, and I think I spent around $300 US on this one. And so these are quite expensive. If you have a look, I've got this cooler here. This is a Coleman Extreme cooler. It's actually larger in size than the Yeti, and this cost me $40. Okay, $40 US compared to $300, and this one still keeps ice pretty long. It's a pretty good cooler. So very different in terms of price, very different indeed, with this being 8 to 10 times the price of a Coleman Extreme. There's also a lot of other rotomolded coolers on the market now as well. Yeti pioneered the rotomolded cooler, started making them in 2006, selling them in 2008, but it's been over a decade now since Yeti first came out with this cooler, and there's a lot of copycats and alternatives out there that are also a lot cheaper. Arctic are very similar to the Yeti, but are cheaper. I'll link up to them down below. Also, there's one out at the moment called Lifetime, which sells for under $100. So it's not as good as the Yeti, but it does keep ice pretty long, and yeah, it's under $100. So I'll link up to those down below if you're interested. But the first problem is the price. The second problem is the weight of the cooler. This is a Yeti 45, and this weighs over 24 pounds when it's empty. Ugh. That's over 11 kilos for the metric people out there, and it's just really heavy and hard to move around. When you start to fill this up with ice and with food, then it gets even heavier again. You do have rope handles on the side, or you can carry it underneath, but just moving it around even casually while it's empty, it's just a bit annoying. And then once you fill it up, it gets quite heavy, and you need to be careful of your back. So the weight in this is obviously in the construction being extremely thick rotomolded plastic, as well as filled with pressure-filled insulating foam in there. So that's what helps it have its ice retention, but it does make it quite heavy. The third problem is the latches here. Now, the latches are fine, and as I said, I've owned this for over 3 years now. They don't really show any wear and tear or really much sun damage at all, maybe a tiny bit. But the problem with the latches is they can be difficult for children to use. So I lived in a van. This was our primary cooler in the van, and at the time I had a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. The 2-year-old definitely had no chance of opening this at all. The 7-year-old could do it, and the 5-year-old struggled. My kids are a bit older now, but yeah, it can just be hard for kids to pull this down to lock it in, or to pull it down to unlock it. And it was just a lot of effort for them to be able to do it. There's other coolers out there that just have easier latches for children. The fourth problem is that the lid is quite heavy and can actually be dangerous to children as well. So you can see here, don't put any kids inside it. Obviously you can get trapped in there and suffocate. We don't want to see that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how heavy the lid is. And while it does stay up quite well, I'm not worried about it just falling down by accident in normal use, but it's just so heavy that if it was to fall, you can see that this could cause a lot of damage to some little fingers that are under there. Now, as adults, that's not really going to be a problem because we're smart enough to avoid that. But for children, that is something to think about. And I've only seen one cooler actually solve this problem, and that's the Kong. And they do have a little rubber thing that sits in here, so when the lid closes, it doesn't close on your hands, so it protects the kids, and you can just pull that rubber latch back to shut it properly. So I'll link up to the Kong down below if that's something that you're concerned about, but that's the only cooler that I've seen actually solve this problem. The fifth problem with the Yeti is that the ice retention, while it's good, it's not the best in the industry. So Yeti, as I said, pioneered the rotomolded cooler. They tend to be still the most expensive cooler out there. There are some more expensive, but generally speaking, this is the most expensive option. And it keeps ice well. It keeps ice 5 to 10 days. I did an ice test on the Yeti, which I'll link up down below, and it did keep ice longer than 10 days, but that was in perfect conditions. So you're more looking at about 5 days ice retention on this. And so while that's good, there's other coolers now that actually do it better. So the Orca is one, the Kong is another one, the Techni Ice, all keep ice longer than the Yeti. And again, I'll link up to those on Amazon down below if you want to go ahead and check them out. I've also done reviews on my website at thecoolerbox.com on those coolers if you want to go ahead and check that out. So ice retention's good, but it's not the best in the industry. And that leads me to the sixth problem, which is you actually need to prepare it before you use it. Now, if you're going to go ahead and leave this out in the sun or leave it in a hot place, like if I left it in my van in the middle of summer where it's just baking in there and getting extremely hot, what happens is that all of this thickness, all of this insulation can actually absorb some of the heat and become quite hot. And so then as soon as you put ice in there, that heat goes into the ice and melts the ice. So what you need to do is actually take it out of the heat the night before, put a sacrificial bag of ice in there, or freeze some ice cream containers, put those in there, sacrifice them overnight just to bring the heat of the cooler down so you can use it. So one of the problems is that you can't just throw stuff in there and expect to get the best ice retention. You actually need to prepare it in order to get that ice retention. The seventh problem is the size of the cooler. Now, as you can see, this is not a small cooler. This is the Yeti 45. And looking at the inside of the cooler, just because there's so much insulation around it, it means you don't get a lot of room on the inside. And so, as I said, this was our primary cooler for 2 adults and 3 children while we were traveling in the van. And as soon as you start putting ice in this as well, it just leaves very little room. Now we could have got a bigger cooler, obviously, but then it would take up more room. So if you have issues with space, this just does take up a lot of room and doesn't give you a lot of room on the inside. Compare that to this Coleman Extreme, and you can see that there's just so much room inside because the walls aren't as thick. And so the profile of this is pretty similar to the Yeti. It's a little bit bigger, but not by much. But inside is just so much bigger. I think that one's 56 quarts compared to this one, which is about 37, 38 quarts. So a big difference there with the size. The eighth problem is that there's no cup holders on the lid. Now, this is obviously, if you put in cup holders, it's going to take away from the insulation. But there's just been so many times that I would have loved to have cup holders, mainly because I have children, and children just knock things over so easily. But also when you're camping, you tend to be on uneven ground or ground that's on a slight slant. And so putting your beer or your beverage on there just feels like it's going to slide off quite easily, and it can. Again, I'm coming back to the Coleman here, but you can see that it's got the cup holders in the lid. So this means that even if I'm driving around in the van, if I put something in there, it's not going to come out. Even if it's on an uneven surface, it's going to be safe in there. Even if the kids come by and knock it, it's going to be safe in there. So you do sacrifice on insulation in order to get those cup holders, but I just wish they had them. Most rotomolded coolers don't. Yeti also doesn't have the fishing ruler on here. So some coolers have a ruler on top. I'm not a fisherman, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't really need that size sort of thing, so it's not an issue for me. The ninth problem is the non-slip feet can be annoying. So, we have these rubber non-slip feet on the bottom, and these can be absolutely great. When I'm driving in the van, it's great because I can throw my Yeti in the van and not even have to tie it down, and it doesn't slide around when it's full. When it's empty, it might slide around a little bit, but it doesn't go bashing against the wall. It kind of just slides slowly. And so these non-slip rubber feet are really good for that. They also don't leave marks on the ground either, but when you are camping and when you're somewhere and you just want to move it a little bit, just slide it a little bit, it can just be so frustrating and so hard to slide it around, especially when it's full because of those rubber feet. So there are some coolers where you can flip it and you can have sliding feet or rubber feet. It's up to you. Yeti doesn't have that. So the 9th problem is the non-slip feet can be annoying. 10th problem is that there's no string on the drainage plug. So on the side here you have your 1-inch drain plug, which you can partially unscrew to let the water out, or you can completely unscrew it and it comes out. Now you would think no one would be dumb enough to lose this, because if you're going to take it out, just put it next to the cooler or just put it on the lid or something like that. But somehow, some way, I actually misplaced this for a number of weeks. I don't know, I was emptying my cooler, I was cleaning it out, I put this somewhere, I don't know where I put it, and I lost it for a number of weeks. Now, you can get replacements, they're not that expensive, but my cooler was effectively useless while I didn't have this, because you got this big hole in there where all the water's going to leak out. So I couldn't use it while I had misplaced this. It would just be good to have a string or a way that it connected on so you couldn't actually lose it. Since then, I haven't lost it and I've been more careful. So it's not a deal breaker, it's not a massive issue, but it would just be a nice to have. Okay, the 11th problem is that it only has a 5-year warranty. So a lot of coolers out there now actually have lifetime warranties on their coolers. So this, I fully expect it to go more than 5 years. We're at the 3-year mark now. And apart from the scuffs and discoloration that it has just from use and wear and tear, it's actually still in really good condition and still in similar condition to when I bought it. And I definitely see this lasting longer than 5 years. But there's other coolers out there like Orca, which have a longer warranty. So they have a limited lifetime warranty on their coolers. So it just means that you never have to worry about it. Whereas after 5 years with this one, I would have to worry about it. The 12th problem is that Yeti coolers are made overseas, not made in the USA. So there are a lot of coolers now that are made in the USA. Orca, as I mentioned, are one of them. Grizzly are another one. Even the lifetime coolers that are under $100, they're made in the USA. Whereas Yeti coolers are not. I'll link up down below to my full write-up on this, but the majority of Yeti coolers are made in the Philippines or in China. And so if you want something that is made in the US, then Yeti is not going to be the best option for you. The 13th problem is that there is no bottle opener on this. So some coolers now come with bottle openers, some of them in the corner here where you can open your beverage, some of them under here. Yeti doesn't have them anywhere. You can buy them as an attachment, but you've got to actually screw them into your Yeti and kind of destroy the exterior in order to do that. And so I don't really want to do that to my Yeti. I also didn't want to spend the extra money because they're not cheap. And so the solve that I had for that is right here. I got this bottle opener, which was $1, I think, from just a cheap store. And then I used a hair elastic, one of my daughter's hair elastics, to fix that in place on there. And that just lives there, is low profile, and means I always have a bottle opener. But not having one can be annoying. So that's the 13 problems with the Yeti. I guess a 14th problem would be that some customers do experience warping. So they do have Yetis where, the lid might warp a bit and doesn't sit flush here, but that is covered under warranty. And so while that does happen from time to time, if that happens to you, you can just get in contact with Yeti and they'll replace it for you or fix your Yeti, whatever. So that's covered under warranty. So while it does happen from time to time, it's not really an issue because they will replace it for you. With these problems, I don't see any of them as make or break, that, I wouldn't buy a Yeti because that it has these problems. Obviously, I own a Yeti and I absolutely love my Yeti. I've owned it for 3 years. I've done a lot of different cooler reviews. I've bought coolers reviewed them, but this one I kept. Okay, this one I kept because it is the most premium brand out there. It does have the best finish and the best look, in my opinion. The plastic and the coloring of it just feels premium. Compare this to something like the Engel Deep Blue, and it just feels so much nicer. So while it does have problems, and while it is quite expensive, I don't think that means you shouldn't buy it. I love my Yeti and I wouldn't get rid of it. I also love my Coleman Extreme too. So it's up to you to decide whether any of these problems make or break it for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link up down below to Yeti's page on Amazon, so you can see all of the different coolers over there. You can see more reviews from people over there. That is my affiliate link, so if you go through that and purchase something, I do get a small commission, which helps keep this channel going. So thank you for that if you do click that link down below. But yeah, I don't think this is make or break for the Yeti, but I do think it's some things that you should think about. And there are some of these problems that other coolers have solved. So yeah, there's lots of different cooler options out there. Yeti is one of them. I love my Yeti, but I love a lot of the other coolers that are coming to the market now too, that are solving some of these problems with either easier latches or protection for the lids or strings on the drainage plugs or built-in bottle openers. It really depends what's important to you in a cooler, and so you can spend your money and get the best bang for your buck and absolutely love your cooler. So I hope that this episode has been helpful. I wish you the absolute best as you go out there and search for your perfect cooler. Again, I'm going to link up to Yeti down below, as well as some of the other coolers that I talked about. I think I talked about Lifetime, talked about Arctic, talked about Orca. I'll link up to those in the description down below if you're interested. And I've also done full reviews and write-ups on all of these on my website at thecoolerbox.com. So go ahead, check those out, and until next time, stay cool.